I think we all know this scenario. You're sitting across the table, maybe, trying to catch up on an email,
Hmm.
and the person you're caring for, the person you love, has just barely touched their plate. We've heard this specific one before about a Mrs. F.
Oh, right?
Her oatmeal's getting cold. It's getting that skin on it. And she just lifts her spoon, looks at it, puts it down, and starts this incredibly detailed story about the summer of 1964.
And for the caregiver, that's just agonizing.
It's an agonizing marathon. An hour goes by, everyone's frustrated, and the main goal, nutrition, it just hasn't been met.
Right.
So when a simple meal stalls out and becomes this pressure cooker, how do we get back to a place of routine and dignity? That's our mission in this deep dive,
Hmm.
to look at what behavioral gerontology tells us about these gentle, practical tools.
And what's so fascinating is how often this is, well, it's misinterpreted. We see it as stubbornness or resistance.
Yes, exactly. She's just not trying.
Right. But it's not that. It's a very common behavioral shift that the sources call pacing. And it's basically a signal that the brain is struggling to organize the sequence of eating.
The sequence.
Yeah, and the crucial part is applying pressure, telling them to hurry up, it just makes it worse. It
Yeah.
psychologically triggers this freeze response and shuts the whole meal down.
Okay, let's unpack that because eating feels so automatic to most of us. We forget it's actually a pretty intricate behavioral chain.
It's incredibly intricate. I mean, think about it from a task analysis perspective. Your brain has to orient to the plate, identify the food, then organize the motor plan to pick up the fork,
Scoop the right amount.
navigate it to your mouth, chew, swallow, and then, and this is the key part, immediately remember how to start the whole process over again.
That's a lot of executive function for one bite.
It is. And when cognitive load increases, with changes like dementia, that behavioral change just, it breaks, it fragments.
The brain loses the next move.
Precisely. It's like a computer program that's run out of RAM. It just freezes. So the person stalls. They might scoop the food, but then the brain doesn't send the signal to the arm to lift.
And they get distracted.
They get distracted. Or they default to something easier, something more comfortable, like telling that story about 1964, because the cognitive effort of eating has just become too high.
This is where it gets really interesting, this idea of time. The sources talk about this negative feedback loop. Why is a 45 or 60-minute meal so bad, even if they do eventually finish it?
Well, it's about fatigue. Two kinds, really. First, there's just plain physical fatigue. Sitting there for an hour makes the motor coordination harder.
Sure, that makes sense.
But then there's the mental and emotional fatigue. They get frustrated, you get frustrated, and that slow, stalled pattern gets behaviorally reinforced.
So that deep fatigue carries over to the next meal.
It's almost guaranteed. It leads to poor intake later, sometimes even outright refusal. It's a classic vicious cycle. So the goal isn't to rush them. It's to create a structure that protects them from that spiral. A clear time boundary.
Exactly. Something like 25 to 30 minutes, that's the sweet spot. It's long enough to allow for a naturally slower pace, but short enough to prevent that destructive fatigue from really setting in.
And you're preserving dignity because you're not nagging them.
You're not. You're just enforcing a necessary, predictable routine.
Yeah.
And if they don't finish, you end the meal kindly and you offer a structured snack later. It just keeps the peace.
Okay, that's the foundation. Let's dive into the behavioral tools because this is the really practical stuff. And let's start with the one that feels the most counterintuitive.
Prompt delay.
Prompt delay. Yeah, because every instinct tells you to hover and remind and nudge. Come on, eat.
And that's the biggest habit we have to break. That constant stream of verbal prompts, take another bite and you need to eat this.
Yeah.
It actually interferes with the brain's attempt to initiate the action itself.
It just adds more noise.
It adds more noise, increases stress, and ironically, slows everything down. So the technique is to literally just wait, even when it feels unnatural. How long are we talking?
It needs to be a deliberate pause. You give one single gentle cue, something like, let's try a bite of the chicken now.
Okay.
And then you count silently to 10, maybe even 15 seconds. You have to give the brain that critical processing time it needs to fire up the sequence.
And if they move within that time, it's a win.
It's a huge win. Their independence increases, and the caregiver gets to stop being a nag and start being a guide.
I can imagine 15 seconds feels like an eternity in that moment.
It can, but it's so important.
Now, you mentioned cues.
Yeah.
And the sources are pretty clear that visual cues are almost always better than verbal ones. Why is that?
It's about cognitive complexity. A verbal cue is, well, it's a lot of work. You have to hear it, process the language, translate that abstract command into a motor plan, and then do it.
That sounds exhausting just describing it.
Right. A visual cue like pointing or even better, modeling the action, it bypasses all that complex linguistic stuff.
So if Mrs. F is stalled, instead of saying pick up your fork, I should just quietly pick up my own fork and take a bite.
Exactly. You model one slow, calm bite that's a powerful, low-pressure prompt. Or you could even just gently place the fork in her hand. Sometimes that tactile cue is enough to kickstart the whole chain.
That makes so much sense.
Right?
Okay, let's talk about the plate itself. This idea of reduce the plate, not the nutrition. Why is a big, full plate a problem? Is it that decision fatigue thing again?
That's a perfect analogy for it. A large, crowded visual field, a big plate with 4 different foods on it, it can just overwhelm the system. The brain gets stuck. It literally can't find a starting point.
So what's the practical fix? Smaller plates?
Simplify. Definitely use smaller bowls or plates, but also maybe only present 1 or 2 things at a time.
Oh, interesting.
Yeah, so if you're serving chicken and peas, just serve the chicken first. When that's done, you bring out the peas. It builds a sense of accomplishment in these small, manageable chunks.
That's a great tip. And what about when they just freeze completely? The sources talk about pacing with them, not at them. How does that work?
It's about being a supportive partner, not an impatient observer. So if they slow down, you just match their calm, slow pace. If they freeze, you can do that modeling we talked about.
Mm-hmm.
But often, they freeze because they're stuck on the next decision. That's when you offer a very limited, manageable choice.
Right, because offering 4 choices would just overload them again.
Absolutely not. The choice has to be binary. Would you like the applesauce or the toast first? That's it. It requires minimal effort, but it gives them back a little bit of agency, which can be enough to restart the engine.
This whole shift in perspective, seeing it as a sequencing problem instead of defiance,
Yeah.
it's everything. Okay, let's talk about structure, environment, and how to end things gently.
Knowing when to stop is so important. If we push past that 30-minute mark, the whole experience becomes negative. When the time is up, you have to enforce a kind but firm boundary.
Okay, but here's the tough question. What if they've only had 3 bites? Isn't ending the meal a huge nutritional risk?
That is the #1 fear, and it's a valid one, but you have to prioritize the emotional relationship over forcing that last bite. Because if you force it, you damage trust and guarantee they'll refuse next time.
So what do you say?
The language is key. Something like, I think your body is telling us it's full for now. We'll try again with a snack in an hour. It completely resets the tension.
It takes the fight out of it.
It does. And it gives you a safety net to offer calories again when they're rested.
Okay, environment. We know distractions are bad, it seems so obvious, but a busy dining room with the TV on must just shatter that behavioral chain.
It shatters it instantly. I mean, imagine trying to do your taxes while someone is blasting the news and asking you questions. It's impossible. For a person struggling with sequence, all that noise, it just breaks the connection.
So a calm environment, and if they start talking nonstop, like the 1964 story,
You gently redirect. You don't ignore them. You say, that sounds so interesting. Let's take 1 bite of chicken and then you can tell me more. Acknowledge, then redirect to the action.
and what about managing the time? We want structure, but a big stopwatch on the table feels punitive.
It does. It can really increase anxiety. So you want to use subtle environmental cues. A great one is a soft music playlist that's exactly 25 minutes long. When the music fades out, the meal gently ends.
That's a much more compassionate way to set a boundary.
Or even just using the natural light, as it fades. The person learns the routine is time-bound, but the clock itself isn't the enemy.
Okay, last thing here. What are the absolute red flags? The signs of caregiver is pushing too hard and needs to stop right now.
The signs are usually pretty clear. Agitation, turning their head away consistently, verbal resistance saying no, or closed-off body language like crossing their arms.
So you have to honor those signals.
You have to. End the meal gently. And sometimes, just walking away for a minute while staying in earshot can help. It reduces that social pressure of being watched.
That's really insightful. And we should probably mention that this pacing changes. It's not the same every day.
Oh, absolutely not. It varies with sleep, with general fatigue, and we have to acknowledge sundowning. For many people, meals just get significantly slower in the evening.
So the takeaway there is to schedule the bigger, more important meals for earlier in the day.
Exactly. Front load the calories. Plan your most nutritionally dense meal for the morning or early afternoon when their focus is likely at its peak.
So if we were to boil all of this down to one single guiding principle for restoring mealtime structure, what would it be?
It's that critical perspective shift. The slow pace is a signal. not sabotage. The brain needs that time buffer, that prompt delay to organize itself. And it needs a calm, predictable space to get the job done.
So you replace the frustration with a kind of compassionate strategy.
You do, and it works.
This whole deep dive really makes you realize how many complex steps we just take for granted in our daily routines.
Every single day, we're on autopilot.
So for you listening, think about how this framework, this idea of task analysis, of breaking down a complex job into simple, predictable steps, applies beyond just the dinner table. If a 30-minute window protects the process of eating, how could that same principle protect other multi-step routines, like getting dressed or preparing for bed?
That's the link to overall well-being.
Protecting that need for predictable routines might just be the key to reducing cognitive chaos across the board. Thank you for joining us for this deep dive.
Thanks for having me.
We'll catch you next time.